Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, is given away in its title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about production stories, marketing stories, distribution stories, release stories, all those ingredients that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love, just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. That said, what you've happened upon here is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast where I invite in a filmmaker and go through their story and their body of work and how they got to be the filmmaker that they are. For the first time too, this episode was actually recorded in front of a live audience at the London Podcast Festival in September 2022. And I'm delighted to say that my guest for that episode, for the one you're listening to, is the brilliant Gurinder Chadha OBE. So I'm going to do a little bit of scene setting, just a few little bits and bobs just before I play the audio from that evening. We talk about a whole bunch of films throughout this conversation. And so there's one that I don't think I've signposted particularly well in the audio. So there is a moment you're going to hear where a round of applause comes up and you don't know the name of the film. And that film is the terrific Angus Thongs Perfect Snogging. So just filling in the gap there. It's also where I mentioned someone called Abby, who was in the room, who was one of the team who helped put this together, and she is a massive fan of that film, and so that's why she gets the name check in there as well. You'll also hear a couple of clips, and what was going on there was me playing 2 or 3 clips from Gurinder Chadha movies, but also specifically the end credits of them. And the point I'm trying to make here, and I appreciate it doesn't come across brilliantly in audio, is that Gurinder Chadha is a filmmaker who loves to have fun with her end credits, and that there are moments across the credits to lots of her films where you see the cast and crew dancing or having a sing-song, or in one particular case, her and her husband, Paul Maeda-Burgess, who is also name-checked in this, having a dance. And so that's what's going on that you can't necessarily see through the medium of podcast. But the rest of it, I think, works. And hopefully you find this as fascinating as I do. Now, usually I set these things up by playing you a little clip, but we bring Gurinder Chadha to the stage to the music of her beloved Bruce Springsteen. Ironically, it's the one of 2 films we didn't really get enough time to get into. But still, let's dig straight into that. Let me take you to the London Podcast Festival, to a packed room, and to my conversation with Gurinder Chadha OBE.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my enormous pleasure to welcome to the stage the first ever Film Stories live in conversation recording. Are you ready? It's only Gurinder Chadha. Yeah, well, it's been a lovely evening. Cheerio, everybody. Hello, Gurinder Chadha.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you very much. Can I talk to you about hats?
Yes.
Okay, so we've got a lovely audience of people here. I don't know how well you can see them, but I interviewed you once before, and you told me, it's a challenge for a little bit later on, you told me you could look at anyone's head and know their hat size.
Yes.
So what I took the liberty of doing is I bought a hat.
Oh.
So at the end of the show, would you find the person who we could do a sort of mini Cinderella here.
Yeah, we could.
You find, if you can just like check them out throughout the
Yeah.
duration of the show, and then we'll work out who gets the hat.
Did I tell you why I have this skill? It's because one of my first jobs when I was at school was working in Harrods in the men's hats department. So I learnt that particular skill there.
What are the men at Harrods like when they come asking for a hat? This isn't where I thought the chat would go, but... You know?
Well, I learnt what a brown derby was, you know. I learnt all the names for all the different hats, a boater. And basically, most men are about 7 5/8 head size. 7.5 maybe. I've got
Very
a very
cold in here.
I've got a small head. I'm only 6.5.
It's quite a head, though, isn't it?
Oh, bless.
It's quite a
Thank
head. You once told me, I never thought I'd be a film director. So I just wonder, can we set the scene for your story?
Sure,
Because
sure.
just the bit that got to the point where you were making, I'm British, but your very first material is quite a story. So I'm going to shut up. Can you tell them this story of what got you to that point?
Well, I grew up in Southall, in West London, where Bend It Like Beckham set. That's very much my story, the Bend It story. But it wasn't playing football, it was more that I kept trying to break the rules. So I would never go into the kitchen like my mum wanted me to learn how to cook Indian food and make round chapatis, because I saw that as an extreme form of oppression. And I would tell her this and say, it's highly sexist, Mum, I'm not doing this, And she'd go, you tell your mother-in-law it's sexist, don't tell me. So I kind of just tried to duck and dive all the time and just not be that Indian girl that everyone thought I should be. And there are lots of lovely photos of me at Indian weddings where everyone's in all their finery, beautiful Indian salwar kameez and saris, and I've got like a 3-piece crimpling suit on, with a waistcoat and everything and flares, and just because I just refused to wear Indian clothes then. But what happened was at school, I loved school, I loved geography. Geography was my thing. When I was 13, I was very proud of my rock collection. I had a lot of great rocks, a lot of granite. I had a volcanic rock from the eruption of Mount Etna. And I used to.
It's not in my notes, but okay.
I used to varnish these rocks as well. I mean, that sounded crazy. I was. So I loved my rocks, and even now, my children, if we go driving somewhere, I'll go, "What rock is that?" And they'll go, "Oh God." So I just loved geography, but now I know I love geography because it was a leveler. It was internationalism. In a way that wasn't being taught anywhere else. And so I always thought that when I went to university, I'd always study something like geography. But at 16, my careers teacher, I had the meeting and I said, I want to go to university and study geography. And my careers teacher said, university, really? I said, yes. And she said, I think you should try secretarial college. And I said, I don't want to be a secretary. And she said to me, these are her words, she said, men need good secretaries. And I just thought,
and hats. Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, she just doesn't have me. She doesn't know what I am, who I am. And really, that was the beginning, because every film I've made, really, and everything I do, is me coming on saying, you think you know what I'm going to tell you. You think you know me and you think you know the story I'm going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you something different and take you on the journey. And so I guess I did go to university. I did geography. I did development studies, so third world economics. And at that time when I was at university, India and China were third world countries. So, things have changed. But at university, I did a dissertation. I found this paper by this woman in India, Dr. Neera Desai, and it was about images of Indian women in India's cinema. And this was before media studies. There were no media studies courses or anything at that time. And it just blew me away, the idea of the power of the camera that it had in deciding who people were. Then, of course, we had the disturbances in England, or riots to some, and I observed how the media was really controlling how these stories were being told, and young black people were being criminalised left, right, and centre. And then I saw a very groundbreaking film by Stuart Hall called "It Ain't Half Racist, Mum," which was an amazing documentary that unpicks the way the media works around race. And it absolutely blew me away. And I thought, okay, I need to do that. I need to somehow get behind a camera. And I thought my way to do this was to become a journalist. and do TV news. I thought if I could control TV news, I could control the world. And so I trained as a radio news reporter and went to Birmingham. Yes.
Let's hear a cheer for Birmingham. My luck, that's never happened ever. That's brilliant. Oh.
Birmingham.
Oh, unbelievable.
There we go, exactly. Oh. But my first job in Birmingham was reading the travel and weather on Radio WM. So it was at the time when there were roadworks on junction 16 of the M1 with huge tailbacks on the M6, and the A38 Lichfield Road was always a problem. Still is, yes. All that's in my head. And it was great, though, because I was part of the newsroom, and I really learnt skills there in the newsroom that have stayed with me till today, you know. So being a journalist, I think, is an amazing skill for a filmmaker, because not only does it help you with the writing, it also helps you with the editing, and also, most importantly, why you're making the film you're making. What is it that you're trying to say? What are you trying to convey? All that comes from journalism, I think. And then, whilst I was a journalist, I then also became a researcher. I worked on the media show with Muriel Gray. And one day, my good friend, Kate Webb, who had worked as I'd met her at a conference, and we became friends, and she was a projectionist at the Ritzy Cinema. And one of the best stories about Kate was, I mean, she was just had so much attitude, and an example of this. Her dad was the literary editor of the Guardian, actually, at the time. But her chutzpah has stayed. I mean, she's still my friend. So there was a film showing at the Ritzy which had a very gratuitous rape scene. And she was furious about this. It was some arty film. And so she decided one day, she took the film off the reels, and then she edited out the rape scene and just put it back together and then projected it. So I was like, oh my God, that's radical. So Kate became my friend. And I said to Kate, you know, something amazing. I was a journalist, I was a researcher. And then the whole music scene in England changed for me. We had the birth of British Bhangra. And I just was so excited about this new music that was being made in Birmingham and London by people like me, who were born here or grew up here, and people like Bally Sagoo who are mixing reggae and house music. And I said to Kate, I said, I would love to do something about this. I know what I'd like to do is a pop promo. Why can't I make a pop promo? And then we started talking about it. She said, why do you want to do a pop promo? And I said, well, I want to talk about the fact that it's British, but also Indian, and it's the fusion. And she said, well, why don't you make a film? And I said, I can't make a film. I've never been to film school. And she said, do you think people who go to film school know what they're doing? And Kate is the one who basically pushed me and said, you should make a film, and made me apply to the BFI and the British Film Institute, and they had a new scheme at the time called New Directors, where you didn't have to have any experience, but you had to have something to say. And I said, I want to make a film about being British and Asian and using the music as my conduit. And what I came up with was actually a very good idea. It was a good idea. And at the time, it just came to me, and this is why I think my career has spanned about 30 years now, because I do occasionally come up with good ideas. But this one was in a film about Bhangra music, but also identity. I wanted to interview 4 young Asians to talk about identity and see how they saw themselves. But the 4 I interviewed one was from Scotland, one was from Northern Ireland, one was from England, and one was from Wales. So all of a sudden, I was asking Ramesh, how do you see yourself? And he went, not Irish, that's who I am, you know. It's nice living here, so it is. And I'm going, hold on, you're brown, but you talk like that. And so the audience was just shocked. And the same with the Scottish, you know, girl, Jabeen. She was like, I'd prefer to be called a Scottish Pakistani, you know, than British, and so on and so forth. And so it ended up being much bigger than what I intended it to be, and I realised the power of film. And that is I'm British But, my first film.
That's not a bad start, is it? That's just like...
It wasn't short, sorry.
No. Well, a lot of time when we talk to filmmakers, because making film reachable, I think, is a huge thing, and showing that there were rules that, with the best will in the world, it just sounded like you completely ignored and just said, I'm just going to go and do it anyway, is what got you to the stuff that we're going to talk about a little bit later on.
Sure, but another thing that happened in the... So I'm British But, you'll have to all go and see on the BFI website now.
It's on BFI Player. If you've not seen
BFI
that.
Player, yeah. What happened when I was editing it, I did this... So it is about music, it is about identity, but it's also about racism, and it's also about imperialism. And I bring all this into this half-hour film, okay? And my exec producer from the BFI at the time was Ben Gibson, God bless him, Ben. And Ben came in and watched it, and he said, Gurinder, this is a film about music, not racism. And I said, Ben, everything's about racism. And I remember saying that to him in Rathbone Street. And I said, are you trying to control what I'm trying to say? And he said, no, I'm just saying that, it's skewed. Anyway, he left the room, and I just thought, right, this is how he's trying to manipulate me. And so I then put a whole bunch more stuff about racism in the film. So when you watch it now, it does go, la, 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 music. And then suddenly it's like a mallet has hit you on the head with all this sort of anti-racist protest. I mean, it works, but I do go, oh, shit, that's a bit heavy. But that was as a result of someone coming to sort of try and interfere with what I wanted to say. And so I learned very early on how to be clever about what you're trying to say and find ways to say it where people can't manipulate you out of not saying it.
And so, by 1990, you'd launched your first production company.
Yeah.
You put an awful lot on screen, and you were on Radio 4 a week or two ago, and you talked about how the movie gods were with you, and you mentioned someone at Film 4 called Karen Bamborough. So I'm going to put a poster on the screen. Let's just see. Has anyone seen this film? Well, I've got no idea because the clicker doesn't work. Let's try that again. Has anyone seen that? Yes. How are we on that? That's good. So that's from 1990 to so Bhaji On The Beach, Mira Sayal wrote, you directed that, and I remember I was growing up as a teenager in the UK at that time. If I wanted to go and see a British film, and no disrespect to them, but I had to go and see Howard's End, or I had to go and see something very period drama or miserable, or everyone's just in a bad mood. And I've watched some brilliant films about people in a bad mood. That wasn't one of them. Bhaji On The Beach is such an explosion, obviously, of character, of colour, of humour, of darkness. And I wonder, can you just take us in that 3-year gap and the impact that Karen Bamborough had on your career?
Of course. So after I made I'm British But, I was very pleased because it was in the Piccadilly Film Festival, and I won runner-up prize, and which was a Holston Pills prize, and it was basically, it looked like a thing of beer, I've still got it in the garage somewhere. It wasn't, it was like, in the pubs, what do you call it, that. It was that, and it said Holston Pills on it. And it says runner-up. Anyway, I've still got that. I'm not allowed to put my awards up in the house. They're all in storage. My husband doesn't like it.
Hang on, is he in the room?
He is in the room,
isn't he? So
you can all give him the evil stare.
So it's just at the back there, yeah. So have a good glare that way.
Yeah. So, that one was particularly ugly, so I understand that. But what happened was the film got notoriety because it was the first film from a second-generation Asian perspective. And one of the people who saw it was Karen Bamborough, who had just taken over from David Rose at Film 4. And I love David Rose, and I thought he is really the godfather of British cinema for my generation. The amount of films that he made was impressive. So Karen had just taken over, and she saw the short, and she said, that's a voice I need to nurture. So she basically plucked me up, and she said, there's this writer called Mira Sayal who I'm also impressed with, who has this idea about a film about a group of women who go to the seaside for the day. So she put the two of us together. We both sat down and thrashed out a story. And then we brought on a wonderful producer, Nadine Marsh-Edwards. We're 3 black women here, 3 women of colour. Brought Nadine on. And Karen basically made all that happen. And then she, we went into quite a long development at Film 4, and then she left, and then David Orkin came in. And that was, so we had to sort of really, at that point, really fight, I think, to get the film made, because I think back then it was very true, and it's true today. If you make a film with people of colour in, Indians in, everyone's suddenly like, oh, it's good, but I don't know if it's going to be commercial. I don't know if it's going to travel, and I still get that. Even though my films have travelled so extensively and made so much money, I will still get that response from people. And so we, in the end, the 3 of us absolutely pushed it, and we got it through, and we made Bhaji on the Beach. And I honestly, I thought that I thought it would do well in London and Birmingham, a few cities. I had no idea of the success of that film and the impact that had around the world. Yeah. And I remember being in, so it was on for weeks and weeks in New York at the Forum. And then when I was in LA doing press, I got a call from this man, Richard Pina, who was used to run the New York Film Festival. And he was in LA, and we were going to meet later. And he said, have you seen the LA Times? And I thought, LA Times, is that like a local paper? So I thought it was like the Croydon Advertiser or something, I had no idea. And I said, no, is it a local paper? And he said, I think you should get the LA Times. And so I thought, why does he want me to get the Croydon Advertiser equivalent? And anyway, we picked it. I went to meet him. He said, did you get it? I said, no, I didn't get a chance. He said, have a look at the calendar. And for people who don't know, the calendar section of the LA Times is really important when you're releasing a film, because you want to get mentioned, you want a good mention, it's Hollywood, it's the place, right? And he showed me the calendar, and I was like, oh my God, the whole front page of the calendar, this big, was a review of Bhaji on the Beach. And it was Ken Turin, who just said, it was Ken Turin, who just said, finally, a breath of fresh air, and just gave it such a glowing review. But I still thought it was a local paper. I didn't understand.
Big in Croydon.
The significance
Croydon's
of that.
#1 film. That's it.
Beckenham and Penge advertiser. I honestly thought it was like... So, but the film really did not only have that impact, but recently I heard it's used extensively in women's centres and refuges, and someone told me that they show it in Sri Lanka in a women's refuge, and so I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
And do you feel the impact of that when people say that? Can you appreciate what you've achieved?
I can now, yeah. I can now, because it's the magic of cinema.
Yeah.
I mean, my favourite story, though, is when I first made it, because I wanted to make something that was saucy, and you had that British seaside sensibility because it was Blackpool.
Yeah.
So that's how I was trying to make the kind of British and Indian stuff come together. My parents came to a screening, and I was like, okay, I just need you to know that there's some scenes in there, there's some strippers and there's stuff like that, and they were like, okay, no problem, So they went in and they went into the screening room, and there's for those of you who haven't seen it, there's a whole scene where the women are on the coach and these lads moon them because they go fast. So there's this huge mooning scene, and then there's a scene in a strip joint where these strippers are sort of, showing all their buttocks and all this, and all the Indian women are there. And anyway, afterwards, my mum and dad came out, and I was like, is it okay? And they said, yeah, it was very good first attempt. My dad said, very good first attempt, like that. And I said, what about all the saucy stuff. Do you think that's all right? And he was very serious, and he said, yeah. He said, I think it's important to show English culture like it is.
Well, you were saying on Radio 4 the other week that when you were filming it, people were just mooning you.
Yes!
You didn't write that in. It's just like they just got their trousers down when they saw the film crew.
Pull a camera out, start filming, and about 10 people started mooning us wherever we went.
I should point out as well that this was the start of your motorway cinematic universe.
Oh.
That you are someone who has put the British road system on screen with some aplomb. I mean, if we go to, we'll get
You're
to.
right, actually. You are right,
so,
Simon. Yeah.
I mean, there's a woman who spent a lot of time on British motorways.
Well, when I was a kid,
You wanted to be a lorry driver.
I did.
Yeah.
A long-distance lorry driver.
So was this it? Was
So
this
I
your-
loved motorways. And I always used to, in the back of a car going to Birmingham, so I always used to look up at these lorry drivers with their big cabs and the power of the road, and it was so romantic for me. But what I loved was that they had the power to stop at any service station they wanted and buy whatever they want.
You were in it,
And
you were
I
in it for
couldn't.
the sweets.
Yeah, we would
gotcha.
go, and I go, can we stop? And it's like, no. So I saw these sweets and I wasn't allowed to buy them.
I think filmmaking was probably a better way forward than lorry driving by
I
the
think
sound. We've got a lot of films to get through, so if you don't mind, I want to move on to the next one because I think it's one that most people haven't heard of, with no disrespect to it, and I
Sure.
only found it myself
Sure.
over the weekend. And it's this film. Has anyone seen this? What's Cooking? So What's Cooking, if I can just set the scene.
American in the house has seen it.
Yes, I can think of one person in the room who's likely to have seen it, yeah. So I watched this over the weekend
did
for the
you?
first time, yeah.
Oh.
I'd sought out the streaming version, the audio on it's terrible. But this was, there was a 7-year gap from release of Bhaji on the Beach
Yes.
to this, and
Yeah.
you made this in America with the help of the Sundance Institute,
Yes.
I got.
Yes.
And I mean, a couple of things. First of all, if your parents were worried about the saucy bits in Bhaji on the Beach, I mean, I've got no idea what they made of what you put in that. I really liked it a lot, and I liked it.
Lesbians.
It's more than that, I tell you. It's proper fruit. We can go off afterwards and have a you go for it. I mean, that's
really?
But I might have clicked
No
on the
sex,
wrong film.
though.
No. It's right.
There's no sex.
There
Because
is.
I didn't do sex for a long time because I was worried what my parents were going
We're
to say.
coming to that. So, what I found really interesting about this, first of all, you made it with an American independent. It was Trimark.
It was made by with a company and a bank, Silicon Valley Bank, and it was made. It was basically made with dodgy money, basically. But anyway, it got made. But what happened was I had tried to make other films. But I couldn't get them off the ground. I tried to make a film about this novel by a Canadian Sri Lankan author, and I couldn't get that off the ground. And there were various things I was trying, and I also got offered lots of Hollywood stuff, but I couldn't relate to it, and I didn't always understand. Now I know. Back then, culturally, I didn't understand how to deal with Hollywood, and the way they look at writers compared to how we do in Britain. So if I read a script that I thought was really, didn't hold together, I didn't realise what I was supposed to go in and say, it's a great idea, here's how I do it. I would go in thinking, well, they like this idea and this is their script, but I think it's a mess, so I'm not going to do it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you have to learn that in Hollywood, everything's changeable. Writers can be fired left, right, and centre. That's the culture. So I was offered various films, but then I thought, well, if they want me to make a film in America, why don't I make my own film of what I'm seeing? So What's Cooking is a very British film about Los Angeles, and it takes 4 families. Latin American, African American, Jewish American, Vietnamese American, and follows them over Thanksgiving weekend. And the idea is whatever is going on in each family, whatever shit's going down, it could be in any of the families, sort of thing. But it was a way of talking about culture and race in a way that Americans weren't comfortable with at the time. Yeah. And so I brought that British sensibility to it, and We developed it at Sundance at the Institute, and it opened the Sundance Film Festival in the year 2000. And I remember being very excited in Salt Lake City because on the stage I got up and said, you know, you have no idea how exotic Salt Lake City is to me. And everyone was laughing. I said, I grew up loving Donny Osmond, you know, and he was from Salt Lake City, you know, and so I was banging on about Donny Osmond, and honestly, it's ridiculous. But anyway, I got the crowd on my side, yes. No, but afterwards I heard someone told Donny Osmond this, and he was really pissed that he wasn't there that night. So I nearly had another dream come true.
Have you met him since? Have you and Donny had your moment?
No, but I saw him at the London Palladium last Christmas. But anyway, I digress. But what's cooking? What was interesting was people really liked the film, but when after the screening, distributors were like, "Well, we like it, but we don't know how to sell it because is it a black film? No. Is it a Latino film? No. Is it an Asian film? No." So I'm like, "It's an American film," but it was also compartmentalized. So like Water for Chocolate was a Latin film, so people knew how to market that. You know, it was all like, if it was separate, they could market it, but they couldn't do it all together. And so in the end, Trimark, there was a nice guy at Trimark who said, I really love it. Yeah, what was his name? Gay guy, so nice, distributor. And he said, I'd love it, but we won't be able to afford it. And then I said, oh, no, let's go with him because he gets it. And so we went that. But the great thing about that film is it's shown somewhere on American TV every Thanksgiving. And no one knows it's me, and no one knows it's a Brit, you know, because it's so American.
I really liked it. A lot. I can say that now. You've said all of that. I really do. It's the hidden gem, really. It's the one I think if I talk to most people about your body of work, it's the one they've not heard. I don't think that poster does it any favour. It looks like Hansel and Gretel. It looks like they're shoving a load of people in an oven, from what I could see. I don't think that does it an awful lot of favours. But, and also, if there are any fans of the TV show 24 here, anyone? It's the only film I've ever seen that's got 2 24 presidents in the same movie as well. Go and look it up if you don't believe me. It's just like so. So, I mean, that film comes out and sort of disappears, and you said that a small distributor and the dodgy money behind it. I'd imagine one of the reasons that we've not seen it since then is it's tied up in just finding someone who's able to get the rights to put it out there.
No, I think it's available. It was available on the Sundance Channel for a long time, but it's not. But it doesn't have much market here in Britain, I think, because it's Thanksgiving.
It's got guns. I wrote this down: guns, cooking, fruity scenes, sexuality, arguments, and lobbing paint at people. You know, IMDb likes to reduce your films down to like a few. Or I could do Netflix categories for it.
I think that see what happened after all this debacle of people saying, is it this film, is it that film? Many years later, this film came out and it won loads of awards. And I was so pissed because it was trying to do what I was doing, but I thought in a very negative, pejorative way. And that was the movie Crash.
Right.
And I just was like, what a load of shit, you know? Like, it's just taken all this diversity and just, like, made it a problem. Everything's a problem.
They gave it Best Picture, didn't they?
Yeah. I was shocked. And then, but that's an example, that's a really good example of how you can be so ahead of the game, so far ahead of the game. You know, and I know this might sound a bit wanky, but I honestly feel that in so many of my films, I'm so far ahead of the game that even when I die, I'll still be ahead of it. And people are going to have to really catch up.
Can I ask, the nosy person in me just wants to know, what were you offered in Hollywood? Were you offered like a Die Hard sequel or something like that? I'd pay to see what you'd do with that.
I was offered Romy and Michelle's high school reunion.
That's a great film.
Yeah. But I hadn't been to high school. I didn't know I didn't get the humour. I know, that was a mistake. I've made a lot of mistakes.
That's a great film. Yeah.
There are films I've passed on that I shouldn't have. Another one was Juno. Yeah.
Oh, God.
I was like, oh, teenage pregnancy. Oh, I don't know. Oh.
Have you got another one just so I can test the crowd reaction again? I mean, that was amazing.
There are others, but I don't think I should say.
I tell you what I'm going to do then. I'm going to test the crowd by, I'm just going to put a slide on the screen of what happened 2 years after this, and let's hear what the crowd have to say about this. So
that's my mum, by the way, in the brown, going like that.
So this works a treat on audio. So what I've put on the screen is a poster from a little-known film called Bend It Like Beckham, which some of you may have heard of. And I mean, again, I go back to the youngster in me growing up. I was young once. And I mean, it just sprang out of nowhere. This did, from us on our side of the fence, just like, where the hell did this come from? I thought, if ever I get you on a stage, I'll just sit back, like, cash my check and ask you, where the hell does this come from? So, Gurinder Chadha, where did that come from?
So what happened, so I'd been in America and I'd made What's Cooking, and I really wanted to make a British film. And as I said, I'd struggled after Bhaji On The Beach. And then I came back and I was watching an England match, and in the 90s, and after the match, Ian Wright ran on the pitch with a Union Jack around his neck. And I was like, oh my God, that was such a radical thing, having grown up with the Union Jack representing the National Front and football hooliganism and all things negative. And to see a black player do that, I was like, wow, this something's different here. And then I went to see some England matches. It was in Camden, actually. And there was a crowd of black, white, Asian, and they were all going, England, England, England. And I was like, what's going on? Because, see, football was not the sport for everybody, and certainly not if you're of colour. It was very, about football hooligans. So I thought, wow, the country's changing. The nature of football supporters is changing, and it's sort of becoming more mainstream. So I thought I'd love to do something in that space. Now, after Bhaji On The Beach, a good friend of mine, Arvi, he had a sister, he has a sister, and he said, oh, my sister really wants to be a writer, will you help her? And I was like, oh, can she write? And he goes, she really wants to, and so I said, okay, send her over. So Guljeet came over and she wrote an idea down, and it was handwritten. So this is before emails. So she didn't even have a typewriter. It was handwritten. She wrote this story called Islands in the Stream, and it was about brother and sister from Hounslow. And the sister was into football and the brother was gay but closeted. And the sister ends up wanting to play, and she goes to Ireland and she plays in a team, and somebody sort of approaches her there and she's a bit freaked out romantically. And then her father dies back home and she has to come home. And I was like, that's the story? And she said, that's the story. So I was like, okay, fine, good. You've done that. Now move on and let's do something else. And so when I saw this Ian Wright business and everything, I thought, Guljeet, let me get a hold of her, see what she's up to. So I said, what are you doing? What's happening? Have you written anything? She said, no. I said, right, here's my pitch. I want to take that idea. Indian girl from Hounslow has got a sister who's really cheap and is getting married. So she's representing that kind of Asian girl. This one's a tomboy. And the two of them and their family, and basically, I basically pitched Bend It to her. And she said, I love it. And I said, right, but you're going to write it with me, because I know fuck all about football. And so I had her come to my house every day, and Paul wrote as well, the three of us. And so I would write, and then when I needed a scene with the girls to talk about football, I would write, jargon, 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 jargon. And then I'd say, right, what are they going to say? And then she would sort of come up with the football stuff. And then it was great because there were certain Indian things that, you know, she had grown up with, and that whole juicy mango thing, that was her, you know. And so it just was a wonderful way, the way that script came together. Paul and I had been married for about 7 years by that time. So he knew my family really well. And he came up with some of the best lines, definitely. I have to credit Paul. There's a reason why Sporty Spice is the only one without a fella. That was Paul. And, you know, and my favourite moment actually...
You're throwing him under the bus here, really,
well, no, I'm saying I'm praising him in case everyone thinks it's all my work.
He hides your trophies.
It's a collaboration. But what I really loved was all the layers in the film. And he got that. And it really is a film that's written from the inside out. You know, if you are Asian and if you are from Hounslow, oh my God, there's so much, or Southall, there's so much you get in it. But you don't have to be from there. You can be from anywhere in the world and you still get it. But the specifics are so good. And he wrote this scene, and I remember reading it, and I was on a stool and I was like this at the end on the floor because it was so funny. And it's the moment when the coach comes to the house and says to the parents, "You've got to let her play. She's really good." And the parents are like, you know, no. And the mum says, "We know what's best for our daughter," you know. And then Jess says, "But Dad, Nasser Hussain is captain of the cricket team, the British English cricket team. Things are changing." And out of nowhere, the mum goes, "Hussain? That's a Muslim name. Their families are different," kind of thing. Like, oh my God, I thought that was absolute genius. So I think that film really struck a chord because it was so authentic. And it also captured Britain at a particular moment. And there's two stories, I think, that... So, okay, I'll tell you. So how did that film get made? So a lot of rejections everywhere. Everyone was like, Indian girl, football, I don't think so. It's not going to work. Luckily for us, David Beckham, we had approached really early on, and he wasn't married at this point, but he was with Victoria. He was with the Spice Girl, you know, and he supported us because he really liked the idea of having more women come to games and also more families. And so that was a great thing, you know. So he gave us his name really early on. He didn't realise, and we didn't realise, that by the time the film came out, he was going to be Brand Beckham. But it took that long, and what happened was I was going nowhere with it, and then I had submitted it to the UK Film Council, who were just taking over from the lottery, and John Woodward was about to take over. And one of the producers on the committee had got in touch with me and said, "Oh, I don't think it's going to work, Gurinder. I think they're going to vote no to the project because the script reports come in." And generally, what happened was you'd submit a script, there'd be a report by somebody arbitrary who would recommend whether the film was financed or not. And in my case, this producer told me some of what the report said. The main thing that the report said was that I don't think you should finance this film because they'll never find an Indian girl who can bend a ball like David Beckham. Exactly. So I was just, what? So I called up the film council and I got John, and I just effed and blowed my head off, basically, and said, "This is so wrong, this is so racist. How does this person think Harrison Ford jumps out of helicopters?" You know, I just went for it big time. And John said, "Look, calm down, you know." And I said, "You know, you lot piss me off because whenever you want to talk about diversity or talk about how hard it is to make films, you know, cultural films if you're a person of colour, you wheel me on to these platforms and you have me sit there and talk about it. And now, look what you're doing to me, you know. You need to back me as a filmmaker. You know, look, it's been so long, all that, I did all that." And I honestly thought I had nothing to lose at that point. And I honestly was going to give up. Because I said, "I'm not going to do this anymore. You know, you lot are all a bunch of racists, You don't want to hear my stories. You think you want to hear it, but you actually don't." I don't think much has changed, by the way. But anyway, in hindsight. But anyway, at that point, John Woodward said, no, Gurinder, you are a very important part of the British film community, and blah, blah, blah. And he placated me. And he said, let's see what the report says. And there were some other notes here and there. And he said, if you address these notes, come back to me, I'll get it into next month. I said, I've got fucking time to wait for next month. So that was a Friday. The committee was meeting the following Thursday it was. Anyway, I went home, I sat there and went, fucking blah, 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 changed the notes. Monday morning, I gave John the script. I said, there it is. And apparently, John walked into that committee on the Thursday and said, I don't care what you do, but you're going to give money to this film. And that's the only reason Bend It Like Beckham got financed. And John Woodward eats out on that story. Because he did make it happen.
Can I ask you two specific things about it? I appreciate, we've got a lot of films to get through, so bear with me on it.
Don't worry.
We had a conversation a long time ago, because I mentioned before, it's like we put you on our front cover, and we talked about just how you were portrayed as a filmmaker. And you talked about what you were looking to do with your films. And you said, conversation about Bend It Like Beckham, if I can vaguely quote it back, and then you tell the story far better than me. But you said people won't look at the film in the way you intended it unless you actively point it out. That people, this is paraphrasing your words, that people see this happy-go-lucky, friendly comedy on the surface, but you described it as it's about a father protecting his daughter from the hurt that he had to go through and he had to suffer, and what it means to live and grow up with racism. I just wonder if you can talk
Well, you said it really well. That's it.
It's your words,
exactly
actually.
that.
I'd happily mansplain and take the credit if you want. But when you got that initial response, were you like a bit dumbfounded that nobody saw that, or was there a part of the audience who you felt did see that?
Well, I have to tell you about two things. One is a remarkable story in Manchester. I'd gone up for a screening before the film was a hit. We had a screening up in Manchester, and I was told on my way up that they had to open a second cinema because it was so busy. And I was like, wow, the Asian community's come out in full. That's fantastic. And I got there, there were no Asian faces. It was full of, a lot of young people, obviously because of Beckham, right? So it was a very English crowd. And after the film, everyone was smiling at me and laughing and going like that, as they walked out. And then this one woman who I'll never forget, because she gave me the gift of my career, basically. She came up to me, and I remember she had white trousers, white shirt. She had a white T-shirt and a white shirt on top, and white stilettos. And I remember looking at that, and she came up to me, and she'd been crying, and she said, "You don't know what you've done, have you?" And I said, "Well, kind of." And she says, "You think you've made a comedy?" And I said, yeah, it is funny, but it's got some serious bits, but it is funny, And she said, what you've done for us around here is you've taught us that everyone wants the best for their kids. It doesn't matter who you are, everyone wants the best for their kids. And she was referring to the Oldham riots that had just happened recently up in Manchester area. And I just was like, oh my God, she just distilled everything in that one statement, And I remember thinking at the time, if I never make another film again, thank you. That was whatever I set out to do back then, she made it worth it for me. And then the other story I always like to tell is the New York Times review of Bend It Like Beckham. You should pull that up sometime. The New York Times review by A.O. Scott is astounding, because it starts with something like him saying, this is not a true reflection of the life of Asians in Britain today. Huh? I don't know, how do you even start with that, And he just goes on to say how the film's inauthentic. And, I mean, look, I do like getting bad reviews sometimes because it's interesting. As a filmmaker, it's interesting. The good is great, but the bad is good because as a filmmaker, that's how you grow. You want to know, and you can always say, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, you know. But also, sometimes you've got to look at what is the criticism beyond what they've said. And 9 times out of 10, it's because they're out of tune with what my POV is. And so obviously, you know, they're going to have a different perspective and they're used to seeing the world in a particular way. And so you do that. But this was so out of step. And I was just astounded that and this is when I say about being ahead and that even when I die, I'm still ahead. It's like that was a moment when I thought, how can that guy say that to someone who's clearly made a film about her own childhood and is a British Asian filmmaker and lives in Britain and has made a film that other Asians and British people are going on about as being good.
And a #1 film in Croydon.
And a #1 film in the whole of the UK, actually.
Yes.
But that New York Times thing is also a salient reminder of how it doesn't matter what you do and how you try and make a mark as a filmmaker when you're talking about culture or race or whatever, you know. There's still people who have really fixed ideas and, you know, they can't move on. One of the things that used to annoy me was when people said it's a culture clash film. And I said, it's the opposite, mate. It's not about clashing, it's about bending. Brilliant. It's about bending the rules to get what you want. And what was really great was when I went to America to promote the film, Fox, actually, when they bought the film, they said, we need to change the title. No one knows who Beckham is. What is that? What is that? Who is that? That's a really bad title. And so we sat there going, well, what could the title be? And we kept thinking, you know, Soccer and Me, yeah, like, no, you know, like real Hollywood sort of titles. And in the end, because we couldn't think of another title, they said, all right, well, I guess we'll go with it, kind of thing. And I did interviews with the Washington Post, and the guy was going, who is Beckman? Why Beckman? Like, and then, of course, the film was a massive hit in America, and then David Beckham got his deal with Galaxy, right?
That was down to you.
So it is down to me. Yes, I'll take that, David. But it was a great, you know, thank you to David for supporting us, you know, and he did, and I mean, he got a lot more out of the deal, I think, than we did. But what's lovely now is to see all his messages about his daughter. Yeah. And his daughter playing and how proud he is of his daughter. So it's quite prophetic in that respect.
Well, talking of which, I mean, I just want to cite the fact that Beth Mead, player of the tournament at Euro 2022, cited, I don't know whether I'm sure you saw this, she cited Bend It Like Beckham as a huge influence on her, just even starting to play football in the first place. Yeah. Incredible.
Well, I read an article that the current female soccer champions, the US team, every single one of them got into football after watching the film.
It's not bad, is it?
That's amazing.
Can you just give me a yes or no to this quickly, because I want to show you a little clip after this. It says on that poster there, 12 to be confirmed. Can you confirm that the only reason Bend It Like Beckham got a 12 certificate in the UK rather than a PG was that you messed up in ADR, you inserted a Punjabi swear word, and you got bad luck because that was the day that someone was working at the BBFC who spoke Punjabi. Is that true?
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Isn't that great? Bend It Like Beckham was also... I picked my 3 favourites because you love end credits. Right?
Yes.
So the Gurinder Chadha end credits universe. I mean, if you get a chance to have a party. So I've picked 3 of my favourites. Paul, you may look scared because you're coming up in one of them, my friend. But how about this? They look so happy.
Look at my mum.
I was going to say, that is your... Yeah.
She's not doing it.
So I've got to cut that short, but we're going to come back to this recurring theme in
Okay.
your work. Sorry. You told me off for not watching the next film that you did straight after Bend It Like Beckham, which was this, Bride and Prejudice. Yeah? Yeah. Right. So I was duly told off, and then I sat with my daughter and watched it, and we loved it. And I don't know whether you know much about Bride and Prejudice, but the remarkable thing about this film was, and again, you confirm this for us, is it the only film ever to open at number 1 in the box office in the UK and India on exactly the same weekend?
Yes.
Incredible.
Yeah, that is good. And Bend It is the only film that's ever been distributed in every single country in the world, including North Korea.
What did they call it in North Korea? What did they call it in North Korea? Did you have a title meeting
but it was
about
on telly. It was like
incredible.
Yeah, it was a big holiday movie.
So, one of the things that comes up in interviews with you often was, were you ever like pushed to make a Bend It Like Beckham 2? And the currency that you had with Bend It Like Beckham, you put into this. Can you explain why this one was particularly important?
Well, after Beckham, loads of people in India, in the whole Indian scene, the Bollywood, Hindi cinema, they were all like, oh my God, who is this person? Who is this person? So I got a lot of offers to come over and make a Hindi film. And I basically said, look, I can't do what you do, but I liked the idea of making a Bollywood film that made the genre accessible to the West. And I thought, what better way to do it than take Jane Austen? And so it's sort of Jane Austen meets Bollywood. Basically, that's what it is.
The scale of some of the musical sequences in it is incredible. Was that an itch you were particularly looking to scratch at that point?
No, that was Bollywood. Yeah, I wanted to do something on a big scale.
Yeah.
Big musical scale. We shoot in England, India, and America. Aishwarya was, one of the biggest stars at the time in the world, in India, and I think that it was. I mean, someone told me it's still the number 1 sleepover movie for young girls in America. And I was surprised at this, but a producer had me over for dinner, and they said, look, my niece wants to come and meet you. And this sort of a 9-year-old, really chubby Italian girl came in, and she had a tracksuit on. And I said, oh, do you like football? Are you a Bend It Like Beckham fan? And she said, I like that film, but I love Bride and Prejudice. And I was like, what? And then she proceeded to sing the Punjabi song phonetically, and then she did all the moves, and she's like, ballet, ballet, and all this. And I said, how do you know that? And she said, oh, that's what my friends, we all sit and we've learned all the words and all the dances. And so it was a massive sleepover movie in America.
You described it as a very deliberate attempt to get English audiences interested in Hindi filmmaking and Hindi filmmaking style. Was that how you went into it?
Yeah, I wanted to bring that genre to the West, and to this day, no one's really done it. It's very hard to make a crossover movie, as they call it. To appeal to both audiences, and so in that sense, I think that it succeeded.
And the simultaneous release, was that your idea? Because it was released 2 different languages at exactly the same time in 2 different places in the world.
Yes.
And
it was released in Hindi as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. And English, and Punjabi, actually. They did a Punjabi
So 3
version.
languages at the same time?
Yeah, it was called From Amritsar to LA.
And were you very hands-on with that? Was that something you were pushing for?
I think I have to tell you, I think the Hindi dubs of most of my movies are very funny. Very funny. The Bend It Like Beckham one's hysterical.
Have you got an example?
Well, you wouldn't get it, but...
Someone might who's listening.
Yeah. Well, it's just that, I don't know, they just push everything a bit further.
Yeah.
And with this, they push things. The humour's just pushed. So I do like to collect the Hindi versions when I go to India. I've bought them,
Yeah.
I go to the shop and I buy it,
Are they kept with your trophies in the same cupboard?
No, they're on the shelf because they're DVDs.
So, I mean, what I get from your film, certainly as they ramped up, is, and I don't know whether this is true or not, it's almost like you approach them as if you're never going to make another film again.
Yes, I do.
Is that fair?
Absolutely, yes, because it's always such a struggle to make a film.
And so
every film, I mean, I believe that people should be running to me saying, here's the money, make the film, you know. I genuinely think that, the amount of money I've made for British cinema, and all this talk of diversity, I'm like, why aren't people running to me and saying, here, make this film? But no, it's still a situation where I have to go and say, this is great, I've written this, what do you think? And I still get all the rejections from everywhere.
Incredible.
Blinded by the Light, I was like, that is such a winner with Bruce and everything. Nope. Pass from Film 4, pass from the BBC, passes from, it's ridiculous. In my opinion, it's ridiculous.
I remember when Blinded by the Light came out, because we were looking for a front cover film. And I rang up assuming it would be taken, that some magazine somewhere, be it film or non-film, would have taken it, and just nothing.
Yeah.
Just nothing. And that's what, 17 years after Bend It Like Beckham, still the same fight.
Yeah, still.
I should point out that this is the second entry in the Gurinder Chadha end credits universe. The moment at the end of this is quite something. This is one of the most indulgent things I've ever seen a filmmaker put on screen.
It's Bollywood.
This is just incredible.
It's Bollywood.
So would you mind explaining what's going on in your end credit moment here?
What actually happened was we had set up for that. That shot's in the film, obviously, with Aishwarya and Martin.
So that is Gurinder and Paul, in case you didn't spot,
A very young Paul.
Just wait till you see the next one.
But what happened was we had been waiting to do the shot, and the actors were taking their time. And so we were all set, camera was set, everything was set, lights were set. And so as a laugh, to keep morale going, I said, all right, Paul, let's do the rehearsal. So Paul and I did the rehearsal, and then it made it to the cut.
And you went from Bride and Prejudice back to Hollywood. Did I?
What did I do then?
You
Oh,
did.
Yes.
This is a great film, right?
Yes.
This is a great film. And this was you working with...
Aaron in Bullet Train now.
Yes. Well, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, your discovery there.
Yes.
And not the first talent you've discovered.
No.
But there's a couple... Because I asked you, this was your first time working directly with a Hollywood studio, with a Hollywood producer. It's Linda Obst, wasn't it?
What I had been... I think by this point, I had been on the Sony lot on a film that never got made and the Fox lot on a film that never got made. So I had been in Hollywood and I had lived that life and been involved in those projects. But, the films falling apart is a big thing out there. It's not, you think, oh, I've made it, great. Oh, I've got a great cast, great. But, the one of the films was Dallas that I was on at Fox before this, and it was a great film, great script by Bobby, who wrote Steel Magnolias, Bobby Harling, and it was really about Bush. JR was Bush.
Yeah. So this is the Dallas TV series, the big budget, but yeah.
Yes, so he wrote this great script about the Bush administration, basically. And it was really funny, and there'd been Enron, if you remember, where they'd all been, and Miss Ellie was doing charitable work with the wives of all the people who were imprisoned, who are having to wear paste jewellery now, and, terribly sad sort of thing. So it was very, very funny. But we had John Travolta playing... JR.
Did he dance?
And no. Well, what happened was I got hired. We started making the movie. We found Southall. We had a whole crew, and then the movie started falling apart. And I didn't know why. I couldn't understand it because they had so much money against it, and we'd spent so much money. But it was to do with sort of rivalries in the end, with different actors wanting actual certain roles and agencies, and it just that whole Hollywood thing is really quite a hard thing to navigate. And I think people spend a lot of time making movies not happen than actually happen. And we only see the successes, but for every success, there are hundreds of movies that are about to happen and they just fall apart because of one thing. And I sadly was attached to two of those movies, which I was really upset about. One, I really wanted to push this male lead in this movie. I'm not going to mention it.
We're all friends.
But the people at the time didn't think he was a big enough star. And I said, but he's so great. He's such a great actor and he suits the role. And so I ended up, losing that battle. But that was Mark Ruffalo, And,
whatever happened to him?
Yeah. So I was like, he was perfect. But anyway, yeah.
Can I ask you specifically, so the film is Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging, and specifically there's one thing you've said about this, and then I've given a question to someone else to whom this is a special film. I think that's fair to do. But you talked about making this film and about films in particular about teenage girls not being valued, and that this was a prime example of this. Can you explain that? Can you talk about that and the response to this movie? Because the tale of it has been extraordinary.
Well, this film is bloody huge.
Yes.
I've been in shopping malls in different countries around the world, and girls have come up to me almost in tears because I think it's because of Beckham, but then no, they go on about this. And it just meant so much to you if you were of that age at the time, because there was nothing else. Interestingly now, there are loads of films on Netflix for young girls, because people discovered that, and so there's so much. But back then, when was this, 2007, there was very little, and teenage girls were just not an audience that people cared about, really.
Yeah.
And so that's why it hit a mark, I think.
So, I mean, I don't know if anyone wants to ask. I feel a bit wrong being the bloke on the audience asking about a film that's so special to teenage girls. Is this special to anyone particularly in the crowd? Can you, whoa, hello, someone at the... Can you kind of encapsulate why it was so special to you?
So I grew up in Eastbourne. So we went opening night, and it's filmed in Eastbourne and Brighton, is that right?
Yes.
And seeing us and our lives, and I loved the books growing up as well. It was that combination of just seeing myself and my friends, or a version, probably cooler, less cool, I don't know. It meant a lot, that kind of representation. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
So the question...
I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack was so good.
Where's
It
Abby?
was so British.
Is Abby in the room? Abby has been going on a bit about the soundtrack for like the last week.
So it's all Scouting for Girls and all these great British bands. And
so, I mean, there was a tonal line as well that was interesting that just wasn't being towed by teen movies of all vintage at this point. Just you were closer to the line than most, because the book's called Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. Is that right?
Yeah.
And this was very much a 12 film, and I think you've said to me it's the only film you deliberately went into knowing it would be a 12. You knew it would be that kind of line, and you knew what it had to be. Were you certain what this was when you got to it?
Well, the books were great, but in the books there's no arc, because they just carry on being that age. And in the movie we needed to have an arc, and so we developed the characters from the book, to that point. And I just thought the love story was so sweet, and when you make a film as a director, you have to find yourself in it, you have to. So I really made it really about me and my friends at that age, and the innocence and just getting everything wrong. And, and I think, again, it comes back to authenticity. Yeah. It's about being authentic and not being afraid to be authentic, and not thinking, it's not cool or it's not this. And so Georgia is not cool, I love that bit where on the beach towards the end when she's messed everything up, and Robbie says, she goes to meet Robbie, and she says, I'm sorry, and he says, well, you were out of order, and she says, I know, and I'm sorry, and they're going to go in for a kiss, and he puts his hand on her hair, and a big clump of it falls out, and he's like, what? And she goes, I was trying to dye my hair. I remember doing that. I remember using Jolin facial bleach in my hair like this so I could get blonde streaks, so I could paint them pink.
We've got, if I'm going to take questions, we've got 5 minutes to do 3 films. So I'm going to dash a little. I'm going to briefly dash past It's a Wonderful Afterlife, if it's all right. But it's an awful lot.
That's the one that got away. That's the one that people need to see.
Oh, can we do another show where we can talk about it? Because can I show your post-credits thing on it?
Yes, sure.
Can we do that?
This is so funny, this film.
Song 1, take 1. 1.
I like this because Paul is really...
You're on there.
And the reason I wanted to show all these post-credit scenes, I know there must be an abundance of reasons that you do them, but for us on our side of the fence, that to me makes film reachable.
Yes,
you know,
totally.
I look at that and think they're having fun, they're doing jobs I might be able to do. And so, yeah, please keep doing that. But I really want to talk about this film, Viceroy's House.
Okay, great.
Which I watched for the first time over the weekend.
Really?
I did, yeah.
First time? Well, I'm going.
First time. I'm an honest person, right? So, and you open this film with a quote about history is written by the victors. And basically, you've given interviews where you said this was a story you didn't quite... You always wanted to make, but you said you never had the courage because it was so personal. You got to a point in your career where it was the time to make it. So can you tell that story for us?
Well, it's about the partition of India, and that's my family history. That's my grandma, that's my uncles, my aunts. And, you know, they were caught up as refugees crossing from Pakistan to India. So I wanted to tell a story about partition, but I just needed to feel equipped to do it. And I meant that in terms of budget and also having the support to tell it in a brilliant way. And when this all came together, again, it took a long time to get off the ground, you know. But I'm so proud of this film. I love this film. It's my best film, in my opinion. And it's the one I care about more than anything, that I was able to make it. And even now, it's so lovely. I'll get messages on Twitter and stuff where people go, how come I've never seen this? This made me cry, or this. And this is one that I think partition will always be remembered. And there'll be, right now it's the 75th anniversary. 25 years will be the 100th anniversary. I'll be gone and there'll be the 120th anniversary or whatever. But this is the beauty of film. It stays. It's there forever. And this is a film about a horrible time in history, but it's been made by a mother. It's about violence and genocide and awful things that politicians did, but make no mistake, my kids were about 6 at the time, and that's what makes it important, is that it is a film about all those things by a mother, and that's what I talked about a lot, because that's what gives it a sort of softer edge, and that's what gives it a different attitude to the violence, and it's also a very healing film, because as a mother, when you see conflict, your job is to go in and find a way around that conflict and find a way to, make people sort of come together, not force them further apart. So, I think it's a film about history and the end of the British Raj from a British Asian mother. And I don't think we're going to see many films like that being made, ever.
You also made it without an overt villain. I sat and thought about it afterwards and thought there's so many different ways that story could have been told.
Well, that's the mother in me, actually. It's very easy to cast villains, you know. It would have been very easy to cast the Empire as, villainous. But I just wanted to explore a different take. I wanted to look at it differently. And so people understood the history differently.
Yeah. It's an extraordinary film, and I just sit back and congratulate you. I think it's a real piece of work.
Thank you. I kind of want, when, this is quite an emotional thing, but when my dad died in 1999, and so he never saw Bend It Like Beckham. And even though that character was totally based on him. And a lot of that dialogue is my dad's dialogue. Or things he would say. And I remember writing certain lines, like when the dad at the end says, 2 daughters made happy on one day, what more could any father want? I remember going, all over my Amstrad, 9012, whatever it was.
That's the level of detail we want. That's just like, I had one of those.
Was it 9052?
Oh, it's the 9512.
Yeah, it was an Amstrad. And then, so I made that film in grief, and that's why it's so raw, Bend It, why the father-daughter story is so raw. But when it's only years after that I realised I was grieving when I made that film. But I was never able to appreciate my films and my work because my dad wasn't there to appreciate it. And there's that thing with your parents, especially immigrant parents, the struggles that they've been through and the lives they're living is not their best life. So they live their lives through their kids. And so my dad definitely lived his life through me. And there were times when I'd get a budget for a film and he'd go, wow, can't you just take that money and buy a house? Like things like that. And I'd go, no, Dad. So he kind of he saw some success, but he didn't see the great success of Bend It. So that always galled me. And for many, many years, I never really appreciated my success. And I still find it a bit hard, to be honest with you. But on the set of this film, my son was 6, as I say, 6 or 7, and we were in the refugee camp. So I recreated a refugee camp with 1,000 extras, and they were all dressed, in rags, and it was very dusty, and my son had enough of India, and he was like, can't we go home? I want to go home. It's so dirty, and everyone looks so sad, and why can't we just go home to London? And as we were walking through the set, and I stopped him and I said, look, this is a story that happened to our family, If I don't tell this story, how is anyone going to know what happened? No one's going to know our story, son. That's why I have to tell this story. And then he looked at me and he went, good job, Mum, good job, Mum. And he flung his arms around me, and I swear to God, that was the moment that healed the thing for my dad, because suddenly my son was like, yeah, I'm going to do it for you now, kind of thing. So it's a bit emotional, but...
I'm going to make you hate me now.
Yeah.
That we're going to have to skip over Bruce Springsteen. Otherwise, I know, otherwise these people won't get to ask you any questions. And so you've said on the stage you'll come and do another one of these.
Yes.
So we can fill in some of the gaps. Yeah? Will you all come back?
Yes.
Right, there you go. So I think it's important you get to have your say. If you do have a question, we've got 7 minutes before we're chucked out the room, so let's do our best. If you raise your hand and a microphone will come to you, otherwise I'm just going to ask about Bruce Springsteen. So you fill your boots.
Hi, I am obsessed with Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging, and I'm very upset that it wasn't called Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging, but I appreciate that wasn't your fault.
That was Americans.
Yeah, no, very annoying. But,
Full frontal, yeah.
Yes, no, you've created some amazing films, obviously not just Angus Thongs, Perfect Snogging, obviously Bend It Like Beckham, Blinded by the Light, everything you've done, I think, is gold. But my real serious question about Angus Thongs and Perfect Snogging is, how did you get the fake tan on Georgia in the pool, and then she comes up and she's got that fake tan? I just don't understand how that lasted. So if you could please explain that, I would love to know.
I think it was hair dye.
I had that exact same question.
It was hair dye, because it was waterproof, right? Not a trick, very complicated, technical sequence, that.
Have you genuinely waited 13 years to find the answer to that? Because that's the best question I've ever been asked during any... Excellent. Does anyone else have a question for Gurinder?
Thank you. Hello, I'm sitting next to my 16-year-old niece who's just started at the London Screen Academy, LSA, in London, and I just wondered if you've got any advice for young people starting off in film
Don't come to
today.
things like this with your aunt. She's sitting there going, cringe, cringe, cringe.
The audio won't pick up the facial reaction in your niece there. It's just like, just get the mic off her.
She's just going, cringe. Yeah, be truthful. That's it. Whatever you write, whatever you want to do, just be honest and truthful. And I would say try and move people. That's my thing. I always say, well, why would anyone want to spend an hour and a half in a cinema watching this? What is the point? How will it impact them? And do I have the right to take 1.5 hours off you and probably 17 quid if you go to the cinema? It's like, yeah, I always do think of the audience as well, and I do think about, I'm always trying to push the envelope. And actually, I used to say this a lot, and I think it's still relevant. All my films are about racism in one way or another. They're just dressed up as comedies or whatever. But they're all about prejudice, and they're all about how can we move away? What does the world look like if we can move that dial just a little bit, And I genuinely believe that Bend It changed race relations in this country, And, at the time I was very happy. I got a bottle of wine from Tony Blair, and I thought, oh, this is going to be worth something. And then Gordon Brown signed the other side of it, House of Commons claret, and I put it away. I thought, oh, this is great. And then the whole weapons of mass destruction debacle happened. So I thought, oh, okay. So the transient nature of success is always there, but films stay forever. Films last forever. So it's important that you understand the context that you're making a film in and why you're making it. And it doesn't have to be heavy. Like, I can sit and watch Tootsie any time of the day. Any time of the day. That is a perfectly crafted film, in my opinion. It's very funny. Same with The Proposal. I think that's funny. Lots of films that... But they... You don't always have to be political, but you do have to... know why you're making a film and why you want to make it, because it costs a lot of money.
I'm just going to ask you what you do next, because I read you're doing an animated movie next.
So I've got so much on the
Tell us everything.
I can't even tell you.
2 minutes.
The problem is because of lockdown, I just got really busy. So I did a lot of writing during lockdown. So now I'm juggling about 5 different things. So I'm going, I'm in, 1 minute I'm in medieval India. Then I'm in Kenya, East African safari. Then I'm in anti-apartheid, 1984. And then, honestly, then I'm in a, Kevin Kwan type world, Crazy Rich Asian sort of world. And I'm just going like this, might be in a Will Ferrell world, So anything that's happening, I just go, bring it on. Let's see. And I used to stress about, what am I doing next? What am I doing next? Got to do. And then lockdown taught me to just go, just sit back. It'll all come. It'll happen the way you want it to happen. Just sit back. And so since I took that attitude, everything's been coming. But I do have a Christmas movie that I love that I'm trying to put together right now. And I might have put it together, and it's my ode to It's a Wonderful Life. And it's very Frank Capra. It's a Capra Christmas British contemporary movie that, again, it's about race, but it's about, bringing us together.
She doesn't disappoint, does she? She doesn't disappoint at all. We are sadly out of time, so I'm just going to edge to the side because I think the stage is yours. I can't thank you enough for doing this. Ladies and gentlemen, Gurinder Chadha OBE.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And that was my conversation with Gurinder Chadha OBE. Thank you to everybody who came along to that recording. I'm doing more live in conversation with events over the coming months. If you keep your eye on the Film Stories website at filmstories.co.uk, you'll find more details on them. I think Gurinder's set quite a high bar there, so I don't know quite how I'm going to match that. It brings me, though, to the end of this episode of Film Stories, and I will follow up and try and get a sequel conversation with her going. But in the meantime, if I've not bored you personally completely, then you can find more from me on Twitter at Simon Brew. You can find more from the entire Film Stories project at Film Stories Pod. Our website is filmstories.co.uk, and if you head to store.filmstories.co.uk, you can find all of our back issues of Film Stories magazines, including the only film magazine to date to give Gurinder Chadha its front cover. You'll be able to order a copy of that there if you want. Also, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/filmstories and facebook.com/filmstoriesonline. For now, though, I thank you so much for listening, and I thank you for your support. I'll be back soon with your regular episode of Film Stories. In the meantime, you all take care, look after yourselves, and bye-bye.